All right, please, court is now in session.
Thank you. Back on the record, the jury is still outside the courtroom. Good afternoon, Mr. Arden. Distributed those initial instructions. She left one on each chair, basically. Mr. Ralston, anything you need to cover before bringing you here today?
No, we're going to get into testimony, obviously, and some exhibits. I do have a couple of, I have 4 actual exhibits, of the exhibits that I think I'm going to enter this afternoon. Got 4 of them that I've got individual printouts for the jurors. It's hard for them to see the detail and timelines and communication summaries that we're going to admit. We're going to do the best we can with TV, but I'd like to be able to publish those once they're admitted.
Sure. And obviously subject to them being admitted once they are.
Right.
With any other parties, if they want to distribute paper copies to the jurors.
Thank you. Yeah, and you have an exhibit book also?
And I think one was distributed to each of the parties at one time.
Yeah, I think we might have. We've got 2 of them over there somewhere. But, yeah, there's one, and there's one. You know.
Okay.
And also, I talked to Ms. Nunzio during the break. A little difficulty with the upload, her accessing it. I understand. I've detailed Mr. Grano and Special Agent Harris to assist her in getting access in there. What they have is from a previous delivery that we made. It's 95% correct, but to get them the most recent electronic information. And I was just made aware of this during the break. We're going to get her access to that.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And that would be the online drive so that you get access.
Exactly. The most recent version, yes. Okay.
That's known for the record. Mr. Nunzio or Ms. Nunzio, anything?
That is correct. There's just an issue with a verification photo being sent. We were trying to figure out why that's not being sent, even though technology says it's being sent.
Well, we all know from very slight download that the great and it works. Just that or anything for you before we went into it?
Judge, I'm not sure or clear. We'd look for you for some direction on how to handle the 343 objections on the exhibits.
Well, as I indicated to the parties, part of the reason that the court then file any objections such as those was so that, in my opinion, now they're part of the record and they are noted. That doesn't remove the party's possibility from objecting during the process of trial. I think you certainly can. I just wanted to give the parties an opportunity to make part of the record prior to the trial. If they didn't want to object each time, I think you could simply indicate when asked about the submission to the subject of the objections that are already part of the record. Obviously, we understand those.
We would ask the court to not allow any demonstrative evidence at this point. If no evidence has been produced.
Okay, well, if the demonstrative piece is thought to be imminent, then we'll deal with it.
Thank you.
Mr. Nunzio, here.
Forgive me for going on one with the part now. Can we concur those objections, or are we now timed out by virtue of the court's order? Okay, so we're just going to register a concurrence on those objections, and as the court indicated, to deal with it as so,
And when you say concurrent, you mean that the written objection is out?
that's correct.
Right. Mr. Barnett, do you also concur with the courtroom pattern?
I do. I only have 3 exhibits to the meetings that I was going to look to for it. I don't know the exact numbers right there. To find those, but
No, that's fine. I mean, that's fine. We can do that as the exhibits come up. Anything from you before we bring the jury?
no, thank you. Okay.
All right, for the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We'll be maybe the next obviously case in chief of the prosecution because they have the burden of proof in this case. Mr. Lawson. Mr. Lawson, your first witness.
Thank you. Special Agent Henrik Impola.
Watch your stand. Before you get seated, sir, will you please stop and raise your right hand? You swear that the testimony you're about to provide will be free, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I do. Right, take a seat. And once you get situated, sir, if you can tell us your full name and spell your last name.
Sure. My full name is Henrik, Henrik, Impola, I-M, as in man, P as in Paul, O-L-A.
Thank you. Mr. Ross.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen on the jury, please?
Good afternoon. I'm Special Agent Hank Impola with the FBI.
Your spelling is, and your true name is Henrik, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and most people call you Hank?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Impola, you indicated that you're a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, is that correct?
That's correct.
Let's talk a little bit about before you became a special agent. Can you tell us a little bit about your educational background?
Sure. So I went to Michigan Tech. I graduated ultimately with an engineering degree. I worked as a mechanical engineer in commercial construction as a project manager before getting into law enforcement with the FBI.
Okay. And can you tell us what year you joined the FBI?
2010.
Okay. And can you kind of walk us through a summary of your different assignments that you've had?
Sure. So after basic training at Quantico, which all agents go to, I was assigned to the Detroit field office. I worked for my first 3 years on a terrorism squad in Detroit. And then for the next 10 years, I was a terrorism agent out of the Flint Resident Agency, which is a satellite office. There's 10 agents in Flint. In 2022, I was assigned back to the Detroit field office and as a supervisor of a counterterrorism squad.
Okay. You said counterterrorism. I mean, how much of your work since 2010 has been in the terrorism investigation realm?
So for all 13 years of my career, my primary assignment has always been counterterrorism. For a period of 5 years, I ran a violent crimes against children task force, which was extra duty out of our Flint office. So I worked on juvenile sex trafficking. Flint's a small office, so everybody contributes to the violent crime in the city. But for my entire 13-year career, it's always been counterterrorism investigations.
Does terrorism break into different groups or different types of investigations? Can you tell us about that?
Sure, yes it does. So for terrorism, you have international terrorism and domestic terrorism. And under domestic terrorism, you've got white supremacy, militia extremism, black separatism, anarchist extremism. So how the FBI does it is we look at the ideology behind why the attacks are going to occur.
Why is the ideology important?
Terrorism is a messaging crime, so it's a crime intended to send a message to the population and to the government. And so the goal of the FBI is to stop the terrorism attacks before they occur. So for that, you have to look at the reasons people would want them to occur. And you try to see who's building up towards that attack, and then hopefully you stop it before anything bad happens.
Did you have any other ancillary duties during your assignment in Genesee County and Flint during those years?
Yes, sir.
Tell us a little bit about that, if you would, please.
Well, for about 5 years, I was a medic on our SWAT team. I previously had some training as an EMT through the local fire department. And then for 12 years, I was a member of our evidence response team, which is another ancillary duty where you respond to crime scenes around Michigan and you collect forensic evidence.
Your current assignment, expand on that just a little bit in terms of what it is.
So currently I'm a supervisor of a counterterrorism squad out of our Detroit field office.
Okay. And if you will, tell us, how does the FBI come to be involved in investigation in general?
Sure. So generally, you receive a complaint or some sort of information. What the FBI is looking for in domestic terrorism investigations is what we call a threat to national security. So if it's a threat of violence on behalf of ideology, and we look at that threat, and then we try to determine how we can disrupt or dismantle that threat.
Okay. In terms of, the FBI and being involved in a state case, I mean, is that unheard of?
Oh, no. We work with our state and local partners all the time.
Okay. This particular investigation, did the FBI partner with any other organization?
Yes, we partnered with the Michigan State Police, who's on our joint terrorism task force, and we worked this case jointly from the inception to the end.
Okay. Can you help the jury to understand from a global perspective or from, 30,000 feet, what your role was in this investigation?
Sure. So I had a number of roles. Initially in this case, I was a CHS handler or a source handler for CHS Dan. That's how the case started. Then, as the investigation progressed, I became a case agent for what we call a terrorism enterprise investigation, which was against the Wolverine Watchmen. So after I became a terrorism enterprise case agent, that means I was responsible for the threat posed by the Wolverine Watchmen. I helped initiate an undercover operation, and then I was the case agent for that undercover operation. That was called Operation Full Snap. So that was kind of the general premise of my involvement. Obviously, there's a lot of specific tasks within that.
Sure. And can you help the jury to understand the time frame of when you became involved in the investigation?
Sure. So I first learned of the Wolverine Watchmen on March 17th, 2020, when we had a complainant come to the FBI.
Okay. And was that, in fact, CHS Dan?
Yes, sir.
Can you explain to the jurors what those letters mean, CHS?
Sure. It stands for Confidential Human Source. So in the FBI and in the federal government, we've got an acronym for everything, and CHS is the acronym for what would be on the state side a CI or a confidential informant. It's the same thing. It's a lay person who is acting on behalf of the FBI without any training.
Okay. In terms of, you said you were the case agent for the undercover portion of this investigation. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do all investigations involve the use of undercover special agents from the FBI?
No, absolutely not.
I mean, how is it, tell us why. I mean, why is that? I mean, I'd like you to explain to the jury the nature of using the undercover special agent.
Well, undercover agents they're dangerous. So you're putting a law enforcement officer in harm's way. So only a small number of cases would involve an undercover, and that would be because the danger to the public, as that escalates and the case escalates, then law enforcement would have to escalate our techniques to try and mitigate that danger. So in this case, as the threat streams merged and the danger increased, we introduced undercovers, which we call a sophisticated technique to try and mitigate that danger.
Okay. We'll talk more about that, I'm sure, as we go along. Tell us, if you will, during when did the investigation conclude? I mean, you told us that it started on March 17th, 2020. What was the concluding date, if you will?
Well, the arrests happened on October 7th, but the investigation for us is still open. We're still looking into, it's an open investigation.
Sure.
And then we're continuing to work and produce evidence and support the prosecution here.
Okay. In terms of, you being the case agent here, tell us a little bit about, during the course of the investigation, what type of evidence do you look for?
Well, during the course of the investigation, we're looking for subjects who are willing to commit violence. That's the big thing. Anybody who's willing to put themselves at risk and to put others at risk.
Okay, and what types of, do you look for electronic evidence?
Oh, yes. Yes, so we look for electronic evidence such as that you'd find in online chats like Facebook or Instagram. We look for electronic evidence that you'd find like on a personal cell phone, like a text message or an encrypted message that's sent on the cell phone. We'd do things like physical surveillance, so we'd watch and verify what happens. And then in this case, we did a lot of audio recordings with our undercovers and sources so that we could hear ourselves what was happening. We made the recordings, and then also we transmitted them and listened to them live as the events were occurring.
Okay, and the recordings, how does that happen? How do the recordings occur?
Sure. So for a CHS or for an undercover, as a handler and an undercover agent, I would provide a recording device to that person who's going to be in contact with any subjects. And then when I would turn that device on and I would listen live during the course of that training or that meeting. And then when the training or the meeting is concluded, I would meet up with the source, retrieve the source or the undercover agent and retrieve that device and turn it off. And then I would take that electronic evidence from the recording device and I would enter it into evidence. And then I would listen to it, and also I would debrief the source or the undercover as to what they saw, any observations that they heard, what had occurred during the meeting.
Why do you do that? I mean, why do you debrief somebody like CHS Dan after they attend a particular meeting or an event?
Well, the short answer is I'm trying to get it right. I'm trying to understand what happened. I listened to the event. I tracked the source or the undercover as they moved their location. I wasn't personally there at the event, and so the sources and the undercovers are the ones who witnessed the event. Also, a recording device captures as much as it can, but sometimes there's noise from clothes, or there's loud gunshots, or there's crosstalk. So sometimes the context of those conversations are important. So you try to record as much as you can throughout the duration of the event, and then gather all the information that's context for what actually happened.
I want to go back a little bit when you were talking about the undercover agents, and I think you testified there that the undercover agents are dangerous. I mean, I think maybe I misheard you, but is that what you meant? Are undercover agents dangerous?
I'm sorry if I said that I misspoke. The undercover agents are placing themselves in dangerous situations.
Okay, fair enough. Well, let's talk about things like Facebook and Instagram and phone records. Can you just go out and get these on your own?
No, sir.
Okay, can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what protections are in place? What do you have to do to meet legality, to meet constitutionality, to look at those kind of things?
Sure. So what you do if you want to look at somebody's Facebook records or their phone records is have to write a search warrant. So I have to write an affidavit with probable cause and present that to a judge as to why there might be evidence on that facility, as we call it, of a crime. And then once the judge signs the search warrant, I would send it, for instance, to Facebook or whatever electronic provider they have to try and obtain those records and then collect those records as evidence. For a phone, once we receive the search warrant, we would do a forensic extraction of the phone, a phone dump, and then I would look through the phone dump record, so that's everything that's on the phone that's extracted, and then I would collect the evidence from that phone dump, as we call it.
Okay. In terms of the documentation, how many search warrants did you seek in this case for different things? Or how many devices did you cite? The better question would be, how many devices or accounts did you seek permission from a judge to look at?
There was quite a bit. So for instance, for Facebook, I believe I wrote 5 to 7 search warrants encompassing 57 different Facebook accounts. Then during the course of the investigation, there was over 20 search warrants for phones. And then also during the arrests, there was individual premises search warrants. Premises is the location where the subjects live. And so over the course of the investigation, this is a rough guess, but probably somewhere between 75 to 100 search warrants.
Okay, and each one of those seeks a judge's permission to do, what you want to do in your investigation, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and in terms of you talked about the returns, what you received back from Facebook, I think you said, and the different cell phone providers. In terms of, like Facebook, how many pages of Facebook records did you receive back?
Well, for each one of those 57 accounts, you generally get 10,000 to 20,000 pages of PDF records. So it depends on how much that user posts, how much content they have, how much they use that application, but they're fairly lengthy returns.
Okay, who's responsible for going through that?
Well, me and my team are responsible for doing that.
Okay. And in terms of, you said there was recordings that were part of the evidence in this case. I mean, roughly how many hours of recordings were made?
The rough estimate would be over 150 hours of recordings.
Okay. Now, tell us, if you will, and who's responsible for going through all those recordings?
Me and my team.
Okay. And have you listened to you personally listened to all the recorded evidence in this case?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And are you able to identify the voices of the defendants that are here in court today?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you see Eric Molitor in court today?
I do.
And can you tell the ladies and gentlemen what he is?
Sure. So he's on the far right of the table, right here in the dark gray shirt next to his counsel, Mr. Bill Barnett.
Okay. And do you see Mr. Michael Knoll in court today?
Yes, sir.
Can you point him out for us, please?
So he is third from the right here. He's wearing a suit with a blue tie next to his counsel, Mr. Tom Cyber.
Okay. And I know I'm blocking, but if Bill Knoll is in the courtroom.
Yes, he is.
Okay.
He's right here next to Christina Nunzio. He's wearing a purple tie and a dark suit.
Identifying the defendants for the record, Your Honor.
Objection.
No objection.
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you. During these 150 hours of recordings that you've listened to, have you learned the defendants' voices?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And have you learned maybe the different names or nicknames they go by?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And let's talk about the recordings a little bit more. Why do you record?
So we can try to capture all the words that are spoken, so that we can determine who said what, whose idea, who brought up what idea, what statement was made at what particular time. We're trying to understand exactly what happened.
Okay. Tell us, if you will, did you have any other ancillary duties associated with this case in terms of discovery?
Yes, sir. So one of my jobs in this case was to produce discovery throughout the entire investigation.
Okay. And what is discovery?
So discovery is the records that are compiled by law enforcement, so Michigan State Police and the FBI. So these are our reports, our audio recordings, the phone dumps that I was talking about, the Facebook returns. So everything that I use to compile the exhibits and compile the evidence, present to the prosecutors, that is produced to the defense. And so in this case, that was one of my jobs, was to compile all that and everything that we used and give it to the defense.
Okay. Tell us, if you will, what started this investigation?
Sure. So CHS Dan was a complainant who came to the FBI on March 17th. So when I met CHS Dan, he described the Wolverine Watchmen and their plans to do no-knock raids and kill law enforcement officers in Michigan. He provided consent for his phone so that I could see the messages and verify what he was talking about and who were the leaders of the Wolverine Watchmen. And so that instance, that was March 17th, that was kind of the genesis of the Wolverine Watchmen investigation, which then led to these threat streams merging, these other individuals coming in.
Okay, and by other individuals, who are you thinking of?
So I was thinking of Adam Fox and Barry Croft, and then ultimately members of Adam Fox's team, Mike Null, Bill Null, and Eric Molitor.
Okay. Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you talked about the Wolverine Watchmen, being the center of your focus in the beginning because of Dan. Where did the Wolverine Watchmen, was there some geography associated with them? I mean, where were they from?
So the leaders of the Wolverine Watchmen were from Jackson County. They were a anarchist militia there, and they assembled regional quick response forces or teams locally in the areas that they lived. But their training grounds and primary location was Jackson County, Michigan. So Munith was the founders, Joe Morrison and Pete Musico, that was their residence and training grounds.
Okay. Agent Impola, have you heard the word boogaloo before?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and can you tell the ladies and gentlemen on the jury, what the meaning of that word is?
It means Civil War.
Okay, and who uses that?
Well, Boogaloo Boys, or those who believe in the Boogaloo, or Mujahideen fighters, those who adhere to the Boogaloo movement, they use the term Boogaloo.
You said Mujahideen. I mean, is that a play on words?
Yes, it's a play on the word Mujahideen.
And what's that?
Mujahideen is a term used in Islamic terrorism to talk about somebody who's a martyr. They're willing to die, and the concept is that they would go to heaven if they are killed in battle.
During the course of your investigation, did a gentleman by the name of Adam Fox come to your attention?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and tell us a little bit about that.
Learned that Adam Fox was selected to be the Michigan commander of the 2nd Continental Army. That was a position that Barry Croft gave to him, so he was Michigan's representative in trying to kick off the Boogaloo, so start the Civil War.
You mentioned the name Barry Croft. Why don't we talk about him for a moment? Can you tell us a little bit about him, please?
Sure. So Barry Croft was a national figure in the 3% movement. He'd been in the militia community or the anti-government community for many years. He had quite a large following, and he started the 2nd Continental Army. His concept was to bring about the Boogaloo by attacking governors across the United States.
So we've talked about the Wolverine Watchmen a little bit. We've talked about Adam Fox and Barry Croft. Did Adam Fox ever connect with members of the Wolverine Watchmen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And give us a brief overview of that.
Sure. Barry Croft sent the Wolverine Watchmen, talked to members of the Wolverine Watchmen, he talked to Adam Fox, and he told them Barry Croft told Adam Fox that he was sending him some boys from Michigan. Ultimately, Adam Fox met with members of the Wolverine Watchmen and trained with them on 2 occasions in Munith, in Michigan.
Okay. Did you create an exhibit for the jury's benefit that shows the subjects of the investigation here?
Yes, sir.
You've got a book in front of you there, and it's got over a couple of hundred exhibits in it. Why don't we start there? On page 1, can you tell us what proposed exhibit number 1 is, please?
Sure. So these are subjects of the investigation that are pertinent to this case in Antrim County. Obviously, this was a large investigation. But what I did is I took driver's license photographs of individuals who would be referenced in my testimony and in the exhibits that were selected as evidence. And I put them all on a chart so that we could visually represent and use that as a testimony aid.
Okay. The subjects there are members of the Wolverine Watchmen included.
Some of them are, yes.
Okay. And is Barry Croft and Adam Fox included?
Yes, sir.
And are 3 defendants included as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Judge, I'm going to move for admission, please, proposed exhibit number 1.
Yeah, we would object, this is not a complete list of the subjects of investigation. There are individuals that are left out. Court wishes counsel to lodge here this witness with respect to subjects that are left out. We would welcome that opportunity.
You asking why are the witness relative
To the exhibit, absolutely.
Okay, go right ahead.
I see the exhibit and it's been provided to us, thank you. The subjects of investigation is more extensive than the 14 you have in the exhibit, correct?
Well, the subjects of investigation, there's certainly more than 14 subjects across the terrorism enterprise investigation.
Where's Concerta's name and where is Dan Harris's name in here?
So I selected individuals here that relate to this story. I tried to narrow it down to the individuals that we'll be talking about who participated, that we felt, or that I felt, played a significant role in the case and that were involved in this county's charges.
So how many individuals, so there were additional individuals subject to your investigation that are not in this photograph, correct? Or in this lineup, so to speak?
So there's a number of FBI investigations. There's investigations out on the East Coast. There's investigations in different states that I wasn't part of, but there's quite a few individual subjects who were investigated as a result of this this incident.
Maybe I didn't make myself clear, forget that. You invested the case involving Jackson County, the Wolverine Watchmen down there, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was part of this investigation, correct?
Well, the Wolverine Watchman was the genesis of how we got here, how Mike Null, Bill Null, and Eric Molitor were identified, but that's a separate investigation involving separate charges with different motives, different stories. So clearly there's some overlap in some of the stories, but I selected the members of the Wolverine Watchmen who continued on with the plot, had some sort of involvement, and that I would be referencing throughout my exhibits.
So essentially you've narrowed down pictures relative to this investigation, excluding those from the federal case in Grand Rapids and excluding those in the Jackson County case that transpired earlier, correct?
So what I did is I selected individuals who are pertinent to the evidence that I'm going to be presenting.
My question was, have you left out the individuals from Jackson County case and the federal case, yes or no? And how many of those individuals have you left out? Because Mr. Wellston had asked you the investigation. It was not confined to the Antrim County investigation. And so this just says subjects of investigation. It doesn't say subjects of the Antrim County investigation. So my question to you is, why have you left out names of individuals subject to your investigation from Jackson County in the federal case out of Grand Rapids Western District?
I'm sorry, which individuals are you referring to?
I'm asking you.
Hang on a second, I don't mean to I just want to make sure that we get the information. So his first question was, the individuals involved in the case, federal case in Grand Rapids, and then the case in Jackson. Sure. Are there individuals that were involved in either or both of those cases that are not on?
So for the Jackson case, Joe Morrison, Pete Musico, and Paul Bellar were charged. Those are members of the Jackson charges down there. And they're on the chart here. They're the lower 3 members of the chart.
So just three-
For Grand Rapids, sorry.
So for the federal charges in Grand Rapids, you've got Barry Croft, Adam Fox, Caleb Franks, Ty Garbin. Those members were charged federally, and then Steve Robeson was charged federally in a different case in Wisconsin.
I apologize.
No, thank you, Your Honor. Thank you for that clarification. Well, Mr. Caserta and Mr. Harris were involved on the surveillance, the daytime surveillance that we heard about in open argument, correct?
I'm sorry, who?
Caserta and Dan Harris.
No, they were not involved in the daytime surveillance.
But were they at the FTXs or anything involved in any of the Luther case or the?
They were at the Cambria, Wisconsin FTX, and they were at the Luther, Michigan FTX.
Okay. Then the Luther FTX was part of your investigation, correct?
Yes, sir. And if it helps, I've prepared a different chart for the Luther FTX with all the subjects who were there.
Thank you. No more questions, John.
Mr. Stiver, any other?
Yes, briefly. Agent, you said you're the evidence holder or keeper.
I collected we call them Elsher recordings, so electronic recordings in this
Holder or
case.
keeper of the
Yeah, I'd ask to allow the witness to finish his answer and not cut him off.
I think I'm seeing just how to do that. Are you done with your?
Yes, sir.
We used another acronym, I think, right there. Can you say it again?
Sure, it's Elsher, so it's electronic surveillance, that's what it stands for. And so for us, that's all the recordings made by the undercover. So I was the one who accepted custody of the recording devices and then entered them into evidence.
Is it ELSUR?
ELSUR, yes, sir.
Thank you, Judge. Agent, you're not a personal witness to either of the charged counts in this case. You're not a witness to providing material support to a known terrorist or a witness to possession of a firearm by any of these 3 defendants in this case, are you?
No, I'm going to object. This is outside of order, Judge.
Mr. Stiver, we need to confine this to closing.
Agent, would you agree that these pictures are confusing as they contain only selected individuals from 3 different areas?
I would disagree. I tried my best to not be confusing, and then I provided other charts with different pictures to describe the Wolverine Watchman, the Luther FTX, different events. I categorized those separately, and I did my best to not confuse anybody.
But the Wolverine Watchmen are not on trial board.
Judge, we're outside of the scope of order here.
Mr. Stiver, thank you. Any additional questions? Mr. Barnett, any questions relative to what your proposed people proposed to?
Just real briefly, of the people that were charged at the beginning of this, and on October 7th, you left out Brandon Caserta and Daniel Harris from this picture, right?
So Brandon Caserta and Daniel Harris, who were charged in federal court, are not included in this picture. They are included in the Luther FTX timeline where they participated. They're also in pictures from Cambria, Wisconsin, where they participated.
Okay, but they were subject to your investigation, were they not?
They were subjects of the Wolverine Watchman investigation, which is not what this chart represents. It has some members of the Wolverine Watchman who moved on as the threat streams merged to tell this story. And they are part of the Wolverine Watchman chart that I provided in these exhibits I'm sure we'll get to.
Okay, these are subjects of your investigation.
These are subjects of the investigation who are pertinent to the charges in Antrim County.
If you were in charge, officer in charge of each one of your OIC things, you were in charge of Wolverine Watchman.
Yes, sir.
And Steve Roberson from Wisconsin. And he's at the FTX for the meeting.
Judge, how is this part of order in terms of the admissibility of Exhibit 1?
Mr. Barnett, any questions? Yeah, obviously, the attorney have an opportunity for cross-examination. This is when it was indicated.
Thank you.
Okay. Relative to the request for admission, Mr. Nunzio, is that okay?
No,
Mr. Side?
As to its admission,
Yes.
Judge, we would object as relevance applies. First, this individual has created this proposed exhibit and has no personal knowledge of the 2 counts that are being charged in York County. And secondly, even the court had to try to arrange what this demonstrative evidence would show, as it was confusing to the court as well as to Mr. Nunzio and to myself, and I believe anybody else that would receive it. So with it not being a complete list, not being relevant, not being a portion of anything that this witness personally has knowledge of, and not being a complete list, we'd ask that it be stricken as a demonstrative piece of evidence. It was generated in anticipation of coming to court. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Burnett?
I've had, some defects I asked to look at and didn't talk about them, but it's considered.
Okay. Well, relative to the objection from Mr. Cyber, MRA 401, the definition of relevant evidence. Relevant evidence means evidence having any tendency to make the existence of any fact as a consequence of the determination of the action more probable or less probable than it would be without the evidence. MRA 402 indicates that all relevant evidence is generally admissible, subject to the restrictions included in the rule. And I understand the testimony thus far, especially if Nicola was the OIC or sort of top of the umbrella, so to speak, in terms of this investigation. It sounds like there were many prongs, one of which involved the investigation into the evidence of today relative to the incident in the county. This is a graphic representation of the subject's investigation as he has outlined that in his testimony. There were questions about 1 or 2 individuals that were not on it. And in the court's mind, obviously, the attorneys can cross-examine relative to those individuals in the issue, but it would overweight rather than admitting disability. And so at this point, I will leave people propose exhibit number 1, but the objections are not further.
Thank you, Judge. With that in mind, can we publish that, please, Adam? Tell us a little bit about moving across from the top row, if you would, Mr. Impla, the individuals that are identified there.
Sure. From the top left, there's Barry Croft, so he's from Delaware. Second from the left is Adam Fox from Grand Rapids. Next is Brian Higgins from Wisconsin. Then we've got Mike Null and Bill Null. Then we've got Caleb Franks from Waterford, Michigan. Ty Garman from Heartland, Michigan. So all the members up there, as well as Steve Robeson down here, they performed nighttime surveillance. And then moving along, well, through the middle, we've got Undercover Mark. We've got CHS Dan, and we've got Undercover Red represented graphically. Then down here, the founders of the Wolverine Watchmen, Joe Morrison, Pete Musico, and Paul Bellar. They're the first 3. Then we've got Eric Molitor, who participated in the daytime surveillance, and Sean Fix, who assisted him in the daytime surveillance. And then Steve Robeson. Steve Robeson was formerly an FBI informant out of our Wisconsin office, who became a double agent and started working with Barry Croft up here. And then on the far right is Amanda Keller, who is the fiance of Adam Fox, second from the top.
Okay. Thank you. I want to draw your attention, if I could, to Exhibit 2, please, in your exhibit book. You told us a little bit about the different investigative techniques that you used during this investigation. And, Mr. Siver indicated that you don't have any personal knowledge. Is that correct?
That's not correct.
Okay. You told us about the different search warrants you asked for. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
The things that came back for that. You indicated that you had some surveillance that you actually conducted. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you want to talk about that for just a little bit. When you have a confidential human source like Dan, who is, taking part in the daytime surveillance, what do you do? How do you monitor him?
So Dan's given a recording device and then a transmitter. And that transmitter transmits what's going on in real time live to me. So then I'm hearing what's going on with Dan as it's occurring. So for the daytime surveillance, the nighttime surveillance for these events, I'm responsible for Dan's safety. And so for those times, I'm actually physically doing surveillance myself behind Eric Molitor and behind Mike Null and Bill Null as they're performing surveillance. I have prearranged words set up with Dan if he's in trouble, and a plan of what he can do and where he can go so I can help him if he's in danger. Same with our undercovers.
Do you have any ability to monitor their locations while this is going on?
Yes, sir. So there's the transmitting device. It transmits the audio live, but it also transmits the location. So on my tablet, I can look up the location of where the source or the undercover is as I'm listening to the audio.
Okay. Looking at exhibit number 2 there, can you tell us what that is?
So this is a significant events timeline. So these are 20 events throughout the case. They're not exhaustive. They're events that I selected that support the evidence in a linear timeline as it pertains to these subjects in Antrim County.
Okay. And where did you gain the information that's in proposed exhibit number 2?
So that'd be through live monitoring, through my surveillance, through the results of the search warrants, through interviews. These are just some of the investigative techniques, but I compiled all of that information that I'm aware of as I created the exhibit book and put the timeline here to help guide and lead through.
Okay. Going to move for admission of exhibit or proposed exhibit number 2, please, Judge.
Number?
Yeah, I mean, the exhibit's got some editorial indication in there with respect to uniting for a common cause and so forth. I don't mind the timeline, I understand the timeline, but, you know, now we're eliciting evidence through an exhibit that's editorializing part of the timeline, and I think that's improper, Judge.
Can you point to what you're...
The significant events, the top portion where it says, uniting for a common cause and mobilization for action. That's editorializing, Judge.
Okay. Any objection beyond that?
No.
Okay. Mr. Sykes?
Just the objections been placed on the record with the work session.
Okay. Mr. Barnett?
Just a couple of questions if I could void here.
Sure.
The, starting with the first date where Mr. Molitor's name shows up, 518 American Patriot Rally, this is Mike Noel, Fox, Molitor. Were they together at that time, or they just were in the crowd somewhere, or what?
Judge, this is outside the scope of order here in terms of the
So
exhibit.
I think I know where Mr. Barnett's going with that.
Sure.
So I believe it's a proper first step.
Okay.
Thank you, Lily. So, curious, were they all together? Because it looks like it on paper, I'm just asking if that is the impression you're...
So when I created this exhibit, and my intentions were not to say they're all together, but I did learn during the opening that Eric Molitor had met with Adam Fox that day. So that was the first I knew of it. When I created the exhibit, I did not intend to say I didn't know, in fact, how they came to be there. I just know that all 3 of them were at the same event. I don't know how they coordinated it. None of them were known to me at the time of the event. They weren't under investigation at the time, to my knowledge. And so, however they communicated and got there as a group, if they did or they didn't, all I know is they were all at the event, and that's what I tried to capture here.
Okay, but they were just present at the event.
To my knowledge, I know they were present at the event, and that's it. I don't have any other information.
Response to riots, 531 Grand Rapids, same thing, Fox, Molitor, Bill Null, just present, not in the same group.
So I do have more information about that.
So Mr. Barnett's point is taken relative to the box for 518, but we're going to keep going relative to the other boxes. In fact, beyond the scope out here, I understand what you're looking at relative to the list.
Can I have you just summarize what these names are, whether they're groups or these present?
No, that goes in the scope of admissions for the document. You certainly can do that during cross-examination.
Thank you. I'm good with this.
Okay. And Mr. Nunzio, subject to the, or Mr. Sauer, subject to the ones that we have filed previously with the court, with the diagnostic name record.
Judge, I have to state the record, this exhibit has been, it's not a piece of evidence. It is a demonstrative piece of evidence generated for the purposes of litigation. This is not evidence of a crime or evidence of not a crime, but instead, Judge, the prosecutor would have to bring forth evidence of it, not just put it down on a picture. And this is not evidence. This is demonstrative that hasn't been proven. We'd ask that it be stricken.
Nothing further.
Okay. Well, I certainly understand the point made on Mr. Seibler, but Agent Impula has testified how he created this document, and certainly summaries or charts or whatever phrase we want to use as demonstrative pieces of evidence or exhibits are appropriate as long as the proper basis has been placed on the record. In the court's mind, it certainly has, based on his testimony. The court does take note Mr. Nunzio's commentary relative to the title, which is Significant Events. And so, Agent Impula, just so that I understand it correctly, the title of Significant Events, that's the title that you have placed on this document?
Correct.
And then there are some lines indicating the phrasing uniting for a common cause and mobilization for action. Those are words and or lines, indications that you have placed on there, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, the objections are noted for the record. Again, in the court's mind, those go to weight, not admissibility. Certainly, the attorneys can ask any further questions they wish on cross-examination, but I will admit people just close this to them too. And once the exhibits are admitted, the parties may publish them. There's no need to pass that.
Thank you. Judge, can I approach the jury? Yes.
Yeah, you certainly can.
Thank you.
And just ask her, do you want to pass it down?
And while you're doing that, I'll note from Mr. Ralston and the parties in general, I've indicated obviously to you all and the jury that we will wrap up on approximately 5 p.m. each day. What I would just ask is, whichever attorney is questioning the witness, if you know that around I'm not going to mention it because we're in the after 4 o'clock hour. After you approach 5 o'clock, if we reach a point where you think it's appropriate to stop, just let us know and then we'll take a break.
Fair enough. Thank you very much, Judge. And Judge, I'm also going exhibit number 1. I've got the handouts for the juries too. Thank you very much. Thank you, Judge. Agent Impla, you've got protests listed on the significant event timeline there. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, are protests illegal?
They are not.
Okay. And can you tell the jury a little bit about why you included them on there?
Sure. So in this case, as the subjects started coming together, they participated in rallies or protests where they used their First and Second Amendment rights, but they used it for recruiting and they used it to come together themselves. We talked about the 3 threat streams that started to merge together before they got together in overt planning for the attack. So what I did is I put those protests down and I described them as such. as the subjects use them and as they use COVID to benefit and use the rallies for their advantage.
Okay. The proposed exhibit number 3 in your book there, can you describe what that is?
Sure. This is a Google Maps picture that I took off the internet of Michigan, and it includes a number of locations that I've typed in and boxed that are significant locations for the subjects in the investigation and the significant events timeline.
Now, Agent Empel, I got to stop you there for a minute. You said you were, I think you said you were from the UP, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I don't think the map shows all of Michigan, does it?
Well, the UP is kind of a different state.
Okay. Why did you put the different locations there on the map?
Well, some of the locations are the subject's premises or their house, their residence where they live. The other locations are training grounds. And then I've got the 3 different locations for the governor where attacks were considered. So I've got the Lansing location, or ceremonial office in Lansing, or the governor's home. Then the Mackinac Island location, which is another governor's ceremonial location. It's a residence up there. And then finally, the other location here in Antrim County, which is where the final attack was determined to be.
Okay, I do notice there's one location in the state of Wisconsin, correct? And what does that show us?
That's Brian Higgins' residence.
Okay, and did he take part in either the daytime or the nighttime surveillance?
Yes, he came to Luther and he took part in the nighttime surveillance.
Okay, so I'm going to move for admission of proposed exhibit number 3, please, Judge.
Another?
Yeah. That would stand on my objection to relevance. It has nothing to do with the 2 alleged counts against my client.
Mr. Barnes?
No objection.
Okay. The court will admit that people's proposal exhibit number 3, we that it is relevant and will assist the prior attack. We've been talking about a number of locations already. I assume that that will continue. This was prepared a document with the locations we have discussed, and maybe that would be helpful for reference of admission. People's exhibit number 3 is submitted.
Okay, Plainwell, in the bottom half of the mitt there, what's that location?
That's Mike Knoll's residence.
Shelbyville?
That's Bill Knoll's residence.
Munich?
That's the training ground and residence of the Wolverine Watchman. So it's the residence of the founders, Joe Morrison and Pete Nisico.
Belleville?
That's Sean Fix's residence.
Okay, Luther?
Luther is Wolverine Watchman training grounds. It's hunting property that's owned by Ty Garvin, and it was offered for the Luther FTX, the field training exercise.
And the governor's residence, is that the Birch Lake property?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think the others are self-explanatory. Would you look at proposed exhibit number 4, please, Agent Empla?
I have it here.
Okay, and what is that?
So these are 2 pages. They're Google Maps pictures that I created with similar boxes and descriptions, and these 2 are specific. The first page is specific to Birch Lake, so it's the area, the pertinent areas around Birch Lake as a result of the daytime and nighttime surveillance. And then the second page, it includes the Birch Lake area, but it also includes Elk Rapids. So it has, it's kind of zoomed out.
Okay, the locations on page 1, tell us a little bit about why they're important to the case.
Sure. So there's 4 locations listed on page 1 around Birch Lake. The first one is the boat launch. So that's the area that Adam Fox, CHS Dan, and Eric Molitor reconned and determined that the group would be entering through the water to attack the governor's residence. And then obviously the governor's residence is located here visually. It's on Timber Lake Drive. I've got a note here for Lake Michigan access. So that was the access point that Eric Molitor and Adam Fox and CHS Dan noted during the daytime surveillance. That would be an extraction point once they had kidnapped the governor. And then on the lower right here, there's a note that says apartments. It's apartments across the street from the Oasis Red Bull Tavern that Brian Higgins has identified as apartments that could be used as kind of a continuing safe house to get additional intel and do surveillance to find a pattern of life for the governor to help with the attack planning.
Say pattern of life, what do you mean?
Well, they wanted to know when she came, what the traffic was. Eric Molitor talked about conducting the attack during tourist season, so there's a lot of traffic. So what they needed to do was just get a little more intelligence to help with their attack planning.
Okay. Move for admission of proposed exhibit number 4, please, Judge.
Okay, stand in my objections.
Barnett?
No objection.
Okay. In essence, exhibit 3, has a little bit of relevant. We built maps and we'll help orient the jury in the backminder so that they can make a determination in state on that basis.
Thank you. And if you can help.
Judge, I believe that is exhibit 3.
What?
Oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke, yes.
Yeah, 4. Yeah. Okay. Agent Ipley talked about 2 different surveillances of the governor's residence. One was during the daytime, I believe you mentioned. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And when did that occur?
That was August 29th, 2020.
Okay. And who participated in that?
That was Adam Fox, Eric Molitor, and CHS Dan.
Okay. In the second surveillance, when was that?
That was September 12th, the night of September 12th, 2020.
Okay. And did anybody in the courtroom today take any part in that surveillance?
Yes, Mike Knoll and Bill Knoll participated in that surveillance.
Okay. Let's back out for a little bit. You talked about CHS Dan being part of the daytime surveillance. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, in terms of Dan and how you met him, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I met him on March 17th, 2020. Dan had contacted a local police officer in Mount Morris Township. That's a small township near the Flint area where I was working, and had expressed his concern about the violence by the Wolverine Watchmen, which was a group he had just joined online. I was part of the local violent crimes task force, and I received a referral from Mount Morris Township police officers to reach out to Dan. They thought that the FBI might be interested in the Wolverine Watchmen. So I set up a meeting with Dan, and he provided consent for us to look at his phone to see the messages on his phone, and then he intended to leave the group, but I asked him to stay in the group, to not leave the Wolverine Watchmen, because I was concerned.
Why did you ask him to do that?
I was concerned about the level of violence and the fact that this group was organized. They had their own operational security, that's what we call OPSEC, and they seemed to be escalating towards violence. And I was concerned that the FBI didn't have any sort of coverage on them and that an attack could happen before we could stop it.
Okay. When you met with Dan, I mean, what was it specifically that raised your concern? Was it something he said? Is it something he showed you?
It was the encrypted chats on Wire. The Wolverine Watchmen had established a response code, so they would ping their location on Wire, and they expected a regional team to show up and attack law enforcement if that ping was put out on Wire. One of the vetting questions to be in the group was, are you willing to be considered a domestic terrorist? And then beyond that, the Wolverine Watchmen were talking about using the Onyx hunting app to track down property owned by local law enforcement so they could execute search warrants of local law enforcement and execute the police officers in their homes. So this was in retaliation to their perceived grievances against law enforcement.
Okay. The, in terms of, what was Dan's, excuse me, what was Dan's response to your request?
Objection, here, sir.
Not offered for truth of the matter asserted, but rather to explain to the jury why he did what he did.
Can I see the attorney?
Sure. You guys. Judge, I'm going to withdraw that last question and ask another one.
Okay.
Have you met with CHS Dan and you made that request? Did he stay in the group?
Yes, he was reluctant, but he agreed to become a CHS, and he agreed to stay in the group. I admonished him according to our rules.
Yes, if that was your statement, in terms of what you said, agreed. Back where we were.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you'll hear the term, you just say you probably heard it before you came through TV or whatever it may be. Generally speaking, folks are limited from not testifying as to what other individuals like to. I'll sustain the objection insofar as any statements that were attributed to CHS Dan, certainly the actions such as that he stated, that we can consider that because that's an action that he did. But any direct statements attributed to him.
Thank you, Judge. What was your goal in asking Dan to stay in the Wolverine Watchman?
I wanted to maintain access to the group. I wanted him to be the eyes and ears for the FBI.
Okay. Now, when you ask, a person to do that, I mean, Dan is not a sworn law enforcement officer. Is that correct?
That's correct.
When you have a confidential human source like that, I mean, what steps do you take, before actually asking them to go out and be your eyes and ears?
Well, we do a background check on them. I pull their criminal history.
Sure.
But in the moment, I'll provide them admonishments. We've got rules and policies. So we have to advise this course they don't have to do it. They don't have to work on behalf of the FBI. We have to tell them they're not approved to do illegal activity. We have to tell them that they must be truthful. We tell them that they're not an agent of the FBI, so they can't represent themselves as such. And so in this case, I told Dan all of those things. Those are our admonishments that we're required to do when we sign somebody up to be a CHS.
In terms of, let's come back to exhibit number 4 here, if we could. The first page, and I believe you said that was a 2-page exhibit, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the first page we're looking at now. Just walk us through those 4 points, if you would, please.
Sure. So
Did it in foundation, and the jury obviously didn't have the advantage of looking at it while for explanation.
The court would agree that it is a demonstrative exhibit, and so it may benefit the backliner for let me explain the effort on that.
Judge, that wasn't the objection. The objection is that we've already done this. We've already asked and answered to go and read this exhibit.
I do agree that that was done as part of admissibility and not done in the law of public in terms of the jury restrictions and the record.
Thank you.
Please.
So this map is orientated north. This is Birch Lake right here. This is Lake Michigan on the left side of the map. And then this is 31 is the yellow road going up. So the boat launch is on the north side of the lake. That would be the infill for the attack. Then the governor's residence noted on the west side of the lake is right off Timberlake Drive. The Lake Michigan access is right there on the lower left. And then the Oasis Red Bull Tavern is right under the little icon that I put on there for the Google map, and near the apartments on the lower right. And then right across the street from are the apartments across the street from the Oasis Red Bull Tavern.
Okay. And Adam, can you pull up page 2, please? Thank you. This is page 2 of Exhibit 4. Can you walk us through those points, please?
Sure. So this map is still orientated north, and this is a zoom out of the initial map. So you can see the same map and those same points up there at the top of the screen. And then on the bottom of the screen, you can see Elk River Bridge, which is noted, and the location of the Elk Rapids Police Department.
And why did you put the Elk Rapids Police Department on there?
So that was a location in surveillance, the daytime surveillance, in which Eric Molitor had suggested reconning that area, and that was the closest first responders that Adam Fox could find. So that he had to, that was part of his plan, was to defeat the first responders during the kidnapping operation up on Birch Lake.
How about the Elk River Bridge? Why is that there?
That was part of the plan to defeat the first responders. The plan was to blow up the Elk River Bridge. There's actually 2 bridges there that he talked about blowing up, but that's the particular bridge that he scouted during the nighttime surveillance with the Knoll brothers.
Okay. Judge, it's 4:57. I think I'm going to suggest we quit early today.
Okay. 3 moments. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do is stop for today. We'll have you back here. We're going to start back up at 9 o'clock. So let everybody be back before that so that we can get started at 9 o'clock. So we appreciate it. We have documents there. What I would like you to do is if you could write your juror seat number on top of the paper pad on which you're taking notes. And then what you can do in the jury room on the table, each of you can leave your papers in a stack with that on top of it so that you know which file is yours. The jury room will be locked and secured so no one's going to see your notes. No one's going to look at anything. And actually, now that I say that, let's have you write the number on the back of the paper pad. That way you turn it over on the stack. That way you know which stack is yours, in case the clerk, for example, she's walking through the room, she would look, but just that way there's no question about it as well. Okay? So you are free to go for the evening. Please keep your lanyard with you, so that way you can put it back on. I hesitate to give that instruction because if you're like me, you may leave it at home, but please remember that and bring it with you. Because it's the most vital thing for the next few years. Okay? Thank you all very much. All right, good.
Yes.